The European Union today, it's come out, they've been debating this. In order to try to reduce waste, they want people to reuse existing chargers. Now, keep in mind, most phone manufacturers, because the price of phones have gotten so high, have already stopped including chargers with purchase of phones. So people are already reusing existing chargers. So that rule on its own doesn't do much. But they want all smartphones sold in the EU to be usable with USB-C chargers. Now, to back up, a government's aim is to regulate the things that the industries cannot regulate themselves and to protect its citizenry from exploitation, from military threat. They're there to do the things that a company cannot because they're not profitable. So when people say, governments are inefficient and governments are, expensive, we want it that way. We don't want them to run like a business. They're there to do the things businesses cannot. So if it's going to regulate, ideally it can regulate something that's relatively nimble or long-lasting. The charger on a phone is not. What they're doing is they're locking them into USB-C like it's some universally perfect format, when it's not. By the way, your Nintendo Switch, do not leave plugged into USB-C because many of those charges, once it hits full, it begins draining your Switch. It is not a perfect format. Not all chargers, but some of them. So they picked that format, and now a group full of people, I don't know who all sits on the board that decides this stuff, but congressmen and senators here in the US have asked Google how they make their money, not understanding how ad revenue works, not understanding, and they have such a poor understanding of technology that's changed so much because most of them first got their seat in Congress or Senate before the internet was even a thing. That I don't want that group of people to be the ones that decide what universal charger we stay with. So they did it because they say it's going to cut down on consumer waste. Rather than regulate consumer waste, there's been a lot of proposed regulation where you start to look at the amount of litter and waste and expense, and you start to pass that back up the chain. And so if you're always finding plastic forks in a park, and that's the biggest pain point in a society, then why don't we charge a tax to the businesses that are giving out plastic forks, which will then, pass that on? Or why don't we charge it to the people who are distributing plastic forks to those businesses, right? So there's this idea that you want to tax the people who did the waste. So if somebody's lowering air quality, how do we tax them for that? The cost of the fact that all of us now need protection or need to help correct that air quality, whatever it is. So rather than say, we're just going to tax this and it'll be in your best interest to move to a standardized format or something like that, to just hard regulate it like this seems really short-sighted. But why does Apple want lightning cables in the first place? And why does Apple's cable not universally fit all of Apple's devices if it's such a good choice? So the Apple lightning cable, from my perspective, I don't work at Apple. The Apple lightning cable was a solution to the fact, and came out of the same line of thought that they got rid of the headphone charger. The headphone charger and the cable are all in a desire to make a more durable iPhone. I use my iPhone without a case at this point. It's meant to, those ports are holes in the device to go all the way into incredibly important components. And if anything gets damaged with those ports, the whole phone loses a significant portion of its functionality. So by moving to a single port that can do both, that they designed, they can make a port that is very resilient in a way that other ports are not. And for the other ports that are, many of those ports that are done so by basically putting them in a big box, which means that the iPhones cannot be so thin. So to have the size battery they have in here and to make them this thin, they had to come up with a proprietary solution. Now, it happens to be that our market is set up in a way where they're allowed to pass that cost off to the consumer so they can make something innovative and then make money doing it. So there's no downside for them. So if you want to say, okay, your innovation needs to to be more environmentally friendly, that's fine, but to just outright say it's stupid without understanding it at all feels goofy, because now if a better format than USB-C comes out, the entire EU has stopped onto it, and how does that format even come to exist if the market's not allowed to test it? Now, why do they only put it on some of their devices? Why, at this point, have iPads gone away from it? Why? Because not every phone needs this level of resilience, and I do think there are a lot of advantages to moving to a standardized charger. I don't think Apple's unaware of that. So, I think the phone is the last thing that, I'm not going to accidentally take my iPad in a pool or drop it in the sink. I'm not going to accidentally take a laptop and be operating it. It doesn't have to be as resilient as my phone that goes everywhere with me, as my watch that goes everywhere with me. And so if they need to create something proprietary, it makes sense. So it just, the market should be allowed to decide this. Now, there are times that the market cannot decide something because something has such a critical mass, that the market is being forced into it because you have to go along with it. There are times that the market gets pushed into a choice because that's so heavy, right? And so then the question comes, does Apple have such a monopoly on the market that people are forced to tolerate lightning cables because they don't have another choice? And the answer is no. In the EU, iPhones do not have such a stranglehold on the phone market that you have to have a lightning cable. They don't. They just don't. So the lightning cable itself has no value without the iPhone, and if the iPhone does not have a monopoly, the lightning cable cannot have a monopoly. So, as we talk about things like right to repair, I think there's more thoughtful legislation that can put power in the hands of the consumer, where Apple can be better about making more things available. You've made your money off your innovation. At this point, the technology needs to be easier for people to fix or source fixes themselves outside of you. We can focus on reuse, we can focus on sustainability, but we can do all of that without saying, this one innovation is bad and this one innovation is good, and we're going to hardline this instead of saying, here's what we want to do moving forward. Moving to a singular charger, I don't want to live in a world where there's a single of anything. I don't want there to only be one MMO. I don't want there to only be one internet provider. I don't want there to be one of anything, especially in any industry that's going to remain private. If the government's going to step in and do it, there are times that makes sense that they are the sole provider or primary provider of a service. But they're not going to be the primary provider of cell phone chargers. And so if it's not going to be handled as this government good where we've got to say, people have a right to cell phone chargers and the government's going to distribute 1.5 cell phone chargers per year per family member. So I don't know. That's very frustrating. And then for a company like Apple that's already on a path to being really careful about their carbon footprint and is already not shipping these chargers, to put it under the label of e-waste feels like false pretenses. They're not the ones generating waste. And I'm not saying that they don't, but they are actively working to reduce waste. And there are other companies that are just not. They're just not. There's an incredibly large amount of waste in packaging, in shipping, in quality, where things break so often. And the answer is not to fix or repair them, it's to throw them away. I used to work for a cardiac device company that used a cell phone as the cellular component to communicate the data. They would use refurbished cell phones. So we had a bunch of different kinds of cell phones. And we used every kind of cell phone that had one universal charger. And I can tell you, we bought refurbished chargers, and the charger fail rates are incredibly high. And when those chargers fail, we don't fix them. We throw them away. When the phones die, we fix them. in most cases, they get fixed. They get refurbished over and over and over again. So, like, this already starts to say, okay, if there's a better charger than USB-C that becomes more resilient or allows phones to charge faster, or allows phones to take on other things where they can also maybe transfer data through these cables for things like audio or connecting to, in a way that yours cannot. Or if the port to connect with these allows your phone to take on better performance, being thinner, being smaller as a port, so they have more room for batteries, so the phone can be thinner. Maybe they also protect it from dust or water or heat or zapping people. Because for a while we went through all those third-party chargers for various phone companies zapping the crap out of people. Right? If the government steps in and regulates something, it does make it very, very hard to move that forward. And so there are times that we want that, and I don't think phone chargers is one of them. Apple is a walled garden. They love their walled garden. They've made a business out of their walled garden. And other people that work in and around the industry have had trouble working with them because they have no incentive to work with that. And so I can understand that frustration. It has also allowed them to do things that other people can't do. And you can say, well, this phone has this capability or whatever, then how come people aren't buying those? Apple is doing something unique, and to not acknowledge that is just ridiculous. It implies that every single consumer is just an outright, unconditional, all the time moron who just blindly sheep follows this and decided to get on an Apple device and actually hates it every day, and they really would like your device better or whatever. Like, they do things well. Other companies do things well too. I'm not saying Apple's perfect. They are not. I have plenty of frustrations with Apple. I think this is just the wrong way to go about this. I think it's the wrong way to go about it. It won't stop waste. I don't see how it does stop waste. Because once you buy an Apple device, once you get bought into their ecosystem, you tend to stay with Apple devices, and they don't give you a new charger with your phone, so you just use the previous charger anyway. The chargers don't last forever. People who don't update their phones often, the chargers don't last as long as the phones do, so you're already replacing the charger anyway. I just don't see how this even saves that much on waste. I don't think phone chargers are the single largest driver of waste. This feels a little bit like the regulations that are targeting straws. And we go to get rid of straws. Meanwhile, I go to the store and I realize I want something cheaper from Amazon or wherever. And I go to the store to buy it to support a local box anyway. And what results is that I get a package inside of a package inside of a package inside of a package. And then I order it from that very same retailer online, and they put it inside a bag, inside a package, inside a box. So, and Brian says in chat, Amazon dumping new phones and tablets into the landfill is a huge form of waste. That story is summed up by that sentence. That's the headline. Amazon dumping new phones and tablets into the landfills is a huge waste. That's the title. In that title, who's at fault? In that headline, which that is the headline, who's at fault? Amazon. How did that situation come to happen? Let's back up. Let's talk about that situation. Amazon act as a clearinghouse for individual sellers, much like eBay. Now, they have moved to selling a lot of their own stuff. And so what happens is if you want to list something on Apple, you're on Amazon, you can buy something. I can say, I want to sell paint on Amazon. And I can secure a big old thing of paint, and I can ship it to an Amazon warehouse, and when people order it, Amazon will ship it out for me. But much like a storage unit, now it's somewhere else. But that storage unit is a physical place, and I don't think about it. I think about it as being stored in the cloud. And eventually, that listing's not selling. I'm not making money. Amazon's not making money. And it's time to take the listing back. And Amazon says, hey, why don't you pay to have your paint shipped back to you? And I say, I don't want to. So then they're stuck with my paint. I'm like, I got that stuff so cheap. Just keep it. Amazon doesn't want my freaking paint. So now they're in a position where they have a bunch of stuff they don't want that they have to store. And so they started finding local places to donate it, local places to refurb it. But because of the scale of Amazon, they quickly outpaced those, much like bakeries that have more food to donate at the end of the night than local food, food pantries and stuff can receive. They donate. I've literally worked at a grocery store as a teenager, and we donated all of our baked goods that expired to local like food pantries for like homeless people and everything. And you would have these big bags. They were like basically garbage bags. And you have these big garbage bags that you would just fill with pastries and bread and baguettes. And you didn't even keep them separate. You just tossed them all in there. And then they would come up and they would just pick up whole big sacks of baked goods. But there were times where we had so many baked goods left over that the food pantry said, we don't want any more. We can't store it. We don't need it. Give it to someone else. But there wasn't anybody else that wanted it either. So we threw that food in the trash. And so Amazon got to the point where these companies that were taking these, they were selling pallets. There was a whole trend online on YouTube where people would buy these pallets and be like, oh, I got all these electronics and I bought this pallet for basically the shipping cost. That's because Amazon wasn't trying to make money on it. They were trying to get rid of it. And they got to the point where even that wasn't enough. So they started dumping it. And they were dumping it in the landfills. And then people found out that they're dumping perfectly brand new products in landfills. And it's because it's not theirs. They're not allowed, they're not supposed to take those and then sell those. That would get them in trouble with the first person. They're trying to get rid of them. So, once again, phone cables are not the problem. The problem in that situation is somebody read an article online that said if you list something on Amazon, you can be a millionaire overnight. They blindly listed something, and then the system created waste out of that. I don't see how moving us to a universal charger stops that behavior. It's stupid because it proposes a problem that it doesn't fix. And I don't want excess regulation that proposes a problem it doesn't fix. So, are there problems in the world? Yes. Would some of those be fixed with regulation? Yes. Is littering and waste in our society a problem? Yes. Does this fix it? No. Does this make, potentially, does this make things more expensive for a company or for... Does it start to stifle innovation in a field? Yes. So I see how this does work out poorly. It doesn't always, but this works out neutral or bad to give us nothing. I don't see where this really saves us anything. So, with the Amazon thing, the regulation in my mind is that you force them to pay to ship it back to the destination that shipped it to them. And then they put that cost on me on the front end. When I submit my paint, they say you have to ship it to us as well as give us the estimated shipping cost to put it in an escrow account. And when it sells, we will return you the shipping cost of that item as well as your cut of the payment. I'm sure there's problems with that solution, but if you don't want it in the landfill, that's your starting point. Find the problems with it and work your way down that iteratively. The answer is not, well, but it would be better if everybody moved to universal paint so there weren't so many types of paint on the market. Fix the problem, not the symptom. One time I saw a phone charger in the trash can, so phone chargers are the waste. Come on, man.